everybody. I'm Tom Farr, president of the Religious Freedom Institute. I want to talk to you for just a few minutes about the meaning of religious freedom as it was understood by the founders of our country. Or to put it differently, why do we have religious freedom or the guarantee of free exercise of religion in our Constitution? What did they think they were doing? I think if there's one thing I'd like you to remember from this lesson, it is that they were protecting religious freedom because they thought religion was important for our country. This is something we forget too easily today, but I want to remind you of why it was true. And I'm going to give you 5 reasons for it. Before I do that, though, I want to tell you a little of my own experience, and that is that I got into this issue over 20 years ago in the State Department, of all places, where I began to work as a Foreign Service officer in the brand new, at the time, late 90s, Office of International Religious Freedom, which was designed and still is today to advance religious freedom as part of our foreign policy. The conviction then, which is probably less of a conviction today in our country, that religious freedom is important for everybody. It's not just for Americans. Religious freedom is important because religion is important. I learned this as I served in that office even more than I would have, I think, if I were simply an American historian or somebody who just looked at this from a purely American point of view. So what I'm going to say to you is influenced by my experience of religious persecution of Christians and Jews and Muslims around the world in places like China or India or Russia or Nigeria. Religious freedom is important not only because our founders understood it as such, but they were right that religion is important to all of us around the world, and we need religious freedom. So let me give you those 5 reasons, beginning with perhaps the most important, the one that has to do with individual citizens, individual human beings. Remember that the founders had declared a religious truth claim in our Declaration of Independence, and that is that all of us are equal, not because we went to Yale or we went to Oxford or we went anywhere else, or because we're men or we're women or we have any other characteristics. We are equal because we are all created by God. Our Declaration says that. And if you believe that, as the founders did, there can be no greater driver of human equality. And that has been part of American democracy ever since. So what does it mean as an individual? It means it's a human right to have religious freedom. James Madison, who wrote our First Amendment and is considered the father of our Constitution, said in the Memorial and Remonstrance, which I think many of you will have consulted, religion is the duty that every person owes to God. All of us owe this duty to God. Well, that wasn't so revolutionary, but what was revolutionary is what he said after that. We can only perform that duty with freedom, which needs to be protected by the state. God didn't coerce us to believe in him. No human being should coerce others to believe in God, let alone governments. So he was saying, and the founders said with him in our First Amendment, that we need to protect the right of individual religious freedom because of human dignity, because we're created equal, because we're given this freedom by God. It says this in the Declaration, and it's echoed in our guarantee of the free exercise of religion. Individual human dignity is the place where religious freedom begins in America, but it was a sweeping claim. It wasn't just about Americans. It wasn't just about Christians or any other religious group or any other group of human beings. It was about all of us. And this was so powerful to them, which is why religious freedom was so important to them and the guarantee of the free exercise of religion. The second reason they had now moves collectively, not just for the individual, but for American democracy and indeed for all societies as they saw it. Religion and religious freedom provides a very important limit on government. Remember, the founders were doing something revolutionary. They weren't just breaking with England, although they were doing that. They weren't just declaring a new government, although they were doing that. They were beginning an unprecedented experiment in democracy, unprecedented in history. And it's been pretty successful, although we have some challenges today. I think we all agree on that. One of those challenges is the loss of the notion that religion is a check on government. Now, what do they mean? What did they mean by that? Well, if you're a religious person, ask yourself, is there something more important to me than government? The answer is probably yeah. I have a fidelity to God or to some source of ultimate being and ultimate meaning that is more important to me than any government, conceived or unconceived. Well, guess what? If you believe that, that's a check on the power of government. And in the founding of America, most people did believe that and still do, most of them. To lose that is to lose a very important restriction on the power of government. But let me give you another example of this, and the founders intended it. If people really believe in something greater than themselves, greater than government, greater than any human institution, and they believe that God created all people equal, the chances are that they're going to do good things in what we call civil society. Well, 200 years, 220 years later, we have the strongest faith-based civil society in history, let alone today. In history, we have faith-based hospitals, we have faith-based schools, primary, secondary, university level schools that are run by individuals. These are private institutions. We have soup kitchens. We have homes for the aged and the dying and the sick. Think of the Little Sisters of the Poor. They administer to those who are dying, who are sick and dying. They aren't these nuns are Catholics, but they don't ask about religion. They know that these are human beings created by the God that created them, and they're doing it out of obligation to Him. Well, the founders understood this intuitively, and as a result of the guarantee of the free exercise of religion, we have this marvelous faith-based, non-governmental society across the board, charities of all kinds, orphanages, taking care of people who need our help. Well, if people didn't believe in God, if they didn't believe that God wanted them to do this, we would not have that kind of faith-based society, civil society. And here's the real point that the founders understood. That's a limit on government. If we didn't have these faith-based institutions, charities, hospitals, clinics, homes for the sick and the dying, homes for the immigrant, government would have to take on that role. So faith-based society is a limit on government. So that's the second major important reason for our First Amendment, is a limit on government. And by the way, of course, there are many other limits on government that reflect their desire to do that. Our checks and balances, the division of powers between the state and the federal government, the separation of powers among the three branches of government. All of that was new. It was there philosophically, but it had never been tried. Limit on government is a very, very important reason for the importance of religion and of religious freedom. The third reason given by the founders is that they believed religion, and therefore religious freedom, was a primary source of virtue and public morality. Here, religion, like in the other examples, becomes a very public thing. It wasn't just about Christianity. That word is not in our Constitution. The word religious freedom and free exercise of religion is there to protect, among other things, the notion of public morality and virtue. All of the founders said this, but perhaps the best example of it is in President Washington's second farewell address, where he says to the young nation, and I'll paraphrase, if we don't have morality, public morality in our political life, we'll fail as a nation. And this is another reason why they wanted religion in our public life and protected its free exercise. They wanted virtue, which they believed came from religion in our public lives. So this is a second reason that we are in danger of losing today. Public religious argument, expression about the true and the good was always important to us. We need to keep it so. The fourth overall and vital aspect of religious freedom for our founders was that it is a driver of fundamental human equality. Remember that radical religious truth claim in our Declaration: all of us are created equal in the eyes of God. Um, can there be a greater driver of equality than the conviction that this is true? There are other reasons for believing in equality, but this is a powerful one that is protected in our First Amendment. And finally, and in some ways, I think most interestingly, because it's very rarely thought of and talked about, and that is that religious freedom is a source of economic development, of economic growth. Now, we have at the Religious Freedom Institute uh, conducted studies to prove this is true. It's almost like proving common sense. If you have the stability of religious freedom equality, or if you like, free exercise equality, as we call it at the Religious Freedom Institute, everyone is equal, and everyone within, of course, limits. You can't use violence because you say your religion causes you to use violence. That's a big fat red line. But within due limits, people who are able to live their lives are economically productive. You know who knew this among our founding generation or slightly before? It was William Penn, the founder of Pennsylvania. He was a Quaker, and he advertised uh, Pennsylvania colony. Come to Pennsylvania, it's good for business. He actually made this argument to the English king. And he was right. People came to Pennsylvania in part because it was good for commerce. It was a kind of stability, religious freedom. So the founders understood this, and they wanted this to be part of the reasons why we have free exercise of religion for everyone in America. So let me end it there. There are other reasons, but I wanted to give you these 5 reasons why our founders guaranteed the free exercise of religion for all of us, for us as individuals, and for our religious communities. They believed, in short, religious freedom is important because religion is important. Thanks for listening. I look forward to hearing about the fruits of your discussion.